Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube page. My name is Eric, and today we're going to be talking about evangelism as well as the He Gets Us campaign. Now, if you're new to my channel, I do videos on faith, apologetics, the gospel, and pretty much anything related to current events as well as faith that I basically feel led to talk about. Now, truth be told, I wanted to do this video months ago, but a source that I was using for my information in this video wasn't available and had a few setbacks that were more of a personal nature that needed to be addressed first. But I do think that this is still relevant because, frankly, any group that can make Super Bowl ads 2 years in a row and can actually pay for that 2 years in a row is likely not going away anytime soon. So, I do think it's still worth talking about. One of the more hard critics of this campaign was Mat Walsh, who, again, is, as most of you probably already know, a well-known speaker for the political right and also identifies as a Catholic. Now, I'm not saying I like everything that this organization does or that the commercial was airtight, but most critiques of it, and most notably the person who I'm going to primarily interact with, has missed the mark. I'll leave a link to the commercial just so that you can watch it for yourself if for some reason you haven't seen it. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's hear what Mat Walsh has to say.
They're spending tens of millions of dollars to run these ads during the Super Bowl. There are many very credible and biblically grounded Christian groups in the world that would love to have the resources to run a commercial during the most watched television event of the year, but most of them wouldn't have those kinds of funds if they fundraised and saved for a decade. The people that are behind He Gets Us do have that money, which means they have a unique chance that few Christians will ever have. What will they do with it? What message will they send out to those 100 million souls? Will they call the world to repentance, to humility, to obedience, to virtue? No, 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 and no.
I get that Mat Walsh wants to make daily content, and I also completely understand that not everybody is as methodical and analytical as I am. But there is one piece of research that too many people have failed to do. There was a link at the end of the commercial that people were encouraged to click on. Now, it takes us to an article that says, "What is foot washing and what does it symbolize?" And I'll just read a few excerpts from the article just to get the basic idea. It was these words and actions of Jesus that inspired us. We began to imagine a world where ideological others were willing to set aside their differences and wash one another's feet. How would that look? How would our contentious world change if we washed one another's feet, not literally, but figuratively? Figurative foot washing can be as simple as giving a compliment to a coworker or paying for a stranger's lunch. It can also be as difficult as not responding to someone who's criticizing you or reaching out to an estranged family member. Acts of kindness done out of humility and respect for another person could be the equivalent of foot washing. Honestly, images of people's washing each other's feet look a little strange and disconcerting because it's not part of our modern-day customs, but there's also something beautiful and profound in each image. Our hope is that our latest commercial will stimulate both societal discussion and individual self-reflection about who is my neighbor and how each of us can love our neighbor even as we have differences and serve one another with more kindness and respect. When Jesus washed his disciples' feet, he set an example of how we should treat one another, even those people with whom we don't see eye to eye. Jesus had washed Peter's feet, a loyal friend who would publicly deny that he knew Jesus later that very night. And even more astoundingly, Jesus washed Judas Iscariot's feet, the one who would betray him for 30 pieces of silver. So why did Jesus wash the feet of both friends and foes? What was he teaching them then and us today? Another excerpt says, but Jesus took it. During his last meal with his closest followers, the 12 disciples, Jesus retrieved a bowl, filled it with water, and began washing their feet with a rag. But this wasn't a traditional cleaning after a road trip. Jesus was using foot washing to emphasize a larger point, a symbol for all his followers to see how they should treat one another. The truth of the matter is that while they may not have been calling for repentance from, say, the things you would like, Matt, like, woke politics, it is calling for repentance.
We can already determine that the ad is, at best, a wasted opportunity. And that is, again, in its best form. Because everybody already knows that Jesus didn't teach hate, okay? We know that. We know that hating people is bad.
Well, Matt, maybe you know that, but there are countless people who keep neglecting it. You may know it, but if you're not putting it into practice, then, yeah, God may very well send people to convict you or remind you. You cannot tell me that people in America don't hate each other, or at least there isn't widespread hatred. It's a simple fact. So many people in America are always talking about oppression, about different things of people on the left, and the right also does it. They say that this person's being unfairly treated, or this person's unfairly treated, so I'm not just saying the left does this. And many of those, in both cases, can in fact be legitimate. There are legitimate grievances that many people do have against each other. I'm not denying that. But the truth of the matter is, Jesus' original disciples had it much, much worse. The occupation of Rome was far more unforgiving and harmful than a lot of the things we have today. Jesus still said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, you may say, Matt, that Jesus was bold in his conviction, and to an extent, it's partly true. But it was primarily about the religious leaders. He didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about political oppression or changing politics within the Roman Empire, or, trying to fight for the physical freedom of Israel. He didn't. Now, of course, if Rome just freed them tomorrow, then would he have objected? No, I doubt it. But at the same time, like it or not, his priority was obedience to the teachings of God, which, by the way, do include, whether you like it or not, loving enemies and praying for those who persecute you. Something that is lost on America today. A country like America cannot function without this principle. Let's think about it. Anybody who can love somebody, or respect somebody, or leave somebody else alone who is ideologically like them. But not everyone can love someone, or even tolerate someone else having freedom if they are of a different religion, or even more radically, a different value system. Let's take one fundamental and undeniable freedom in the Constitution, the freedom of religion. Well, guess what? In many countries, both in the past and today, they have prevented many types of religious freedom because it means that certain people will experience pain in the afterlife, more often than not hell. Like, for example, many countries, that have Islam as the primary religion ban other religions because the other religions will send people to hell. And that's harmful. So therefore, from the Muslim perspective, that is. So they try and prevent it. Now, if you want to live in a country with religious freedom and other freedoms, then I hate to break it to you, but we can't function without that principle. And this applies not just to religion, but I'm using religion as an example. It applies to politics as well. Anybody can love somebody who does the right policies that they agree with or think should be done. Sure. Anybody can. But people who you think are doing harm, not as many people can do that. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to live up to those principles, but they should at least be principles that the government recognizes and principles that we should acknowledge that we need to strive towards, even if we don't always succeed.
Jesus did not go around washing everyone's feet, okay? There is precisely one story in the New Testament of Jesus washing feet, and it was at the Passover meal before his passion and death. In that case, he washed the feet of his disciples, okay? The people closest to him, his disciples, the people that had been following him, literally, throughout his whole ministry. And now that did include, of course, the disciple who was about to betray him. But the point is that these were his disciples.
He kind of just goes right past that like it's nothing. Like, oh yeah, it was also Judas, he washed his feet, but it was still his disciples. Well, yes, but let's be honest, what's worse? An outright unbeliever or a traitor within your ranks? And this is somebody who Jesus knew in his mind was a traitor. So, yeah, if he can wash people even from his most loyal disciples to traitors, then yeah, I think he'd probably be willing to wash other people's feet who may even be unbelievers. Just a thought. Now, he also says, oh, there was only one incident of this in the New Testament. Well, Matt, there was also only one instance where he had a communion meal. And yet, you as a Catholic, I assume, do that every Sunday. Not to mention the fact that Jesus literally says in the Gospel of John, now that I have done this for you, you should do this for each other. You must wash one another's feet. So, and just like the commandment, do this in remembrance of me in communion, he also commands this of his followers. So, that point that, oh, well, it was only one time, well, if he's going to tell you to do it, does he need to say it more than once?
So, is this a good entry point, though? Maybe that's the argument. Well, yeah, it's not really the gospel, but it gets people in the door with the feet washing stuff. Well, no, it's probably not a good entry point. It probably won't get them in the door. And even if it does get them in the door, they'll be coming through the door for the wrong reason.
Do you think that an organization that is able to raise tens of millions of dollars has no supporters or no success in getting people in the door? I doubt it. Now, again, I'm not saying that quantity is always better because, it's not. But your point that, oh, it doesn't work. It doesn't work to get people in the door. Look, I think it does because, they have plenty of followers who are willing to donate enough that they can do Super Bowl commercials on an annual basis.
When you say to unrepentant sinners, come and get your feet washed, you are reaffirming them in their sin. You're feeding it.
No, you're not. When Jesus washed Judas's feet, was he affirming him in his sin? No, that's not what it means. Doing kind actions for people doesn't affirm them in their sin. Unless you believe that Jesus was just screwing up. I mean, he washed the feet of a traitor. So, you don't know what you're talking about.
Christianity in the West has been sucking up to people who hate it, has been sanitizing itself, has been watering down its message, preaching against hate, but never saying a word about repentance for decades. And over those decades, we've also seen a record number of people leave the church. We've seen church attendance dwindle to record lows, while atheist and unaffiliated self-identifications rocket to record highs.
Matt, the truth of the matter is that churches being not strong enough or bold or convictional enough, that's not the problem. In the words of many other people who were once Christians but are no longer, the biggest reason came down to they didn't believe it anymore. Now, do I disagree with that conclusion? Yes, but for better or for worse, that is what they said. Have you actually interviewed or talked with or really tried to understand non-believers? I'd venture to guess not. Because I have actually gotten an interview with an amazing friend of mine who also not only is an atheist herself, but she also consistently interviews people of all backgrounds. She interviews people who are still Christians, people who were once Christians, other people of other religions who are now atheists, and many other things like that. And again, for many different reasons, people didn't think it was true. In fact, you don't have to take my word for it. Here's a clip of the interview I did with her.
We'll ask sort of the biggest reason, the biggest question. So, essentially, I guess, what are, in your experience, some of the biggest reasons why people leave, particularly Christianity, whether that's like evangelical Christianity, you could even throw in Catholicism or any of the major branches that, I guess, any of the more conservative branches.
I think that one of the main reasons people begin to question their faith or begin to question whether or not they want to remain involved in the Western Christian denominations I think they start by the confusion. I think a lot of times between the Old Testament and the New Testament, there are details that don't necessarily line up. But I think what makes people leave is the response they get to those questions or the lack of. So, for example, in some churches, a child might ask a question like that and either be given an answer that they don't necessarily feel is an answer, or they're told, stop asking those questions. It makes you sound like you're allowing the devil to, enter your mind and your heart.
Right.
And while I know that's not every Christian and that's not every church, that does seem to be a lot of where these questions begin and these thoughts and these negative responses begin when somebody does eventually leave the church. Now, whether or not that moment is the moment they leave the church, very likely not. But it's a series of moments similar to that where questions aren't treated the way that a question should be treated. Curiosity isn't necessarily supported in the way curiosity should. And then
it's essentially the first domino that in a row of things. Like if it could be either one of those things, it doesn't even necessarily have to be in that order, I guess.
Right.
Totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that it's not due to the fact that the church is just too seeker sensitive. No, they don't believe it's true. And many of them had bad experiences that played a role in their questioning. Also, Matt, if you're going to give advice on what we should do to get people in the church, you should probably consult with actual evangelists. So here's the deal, Matt. Politics, culture, so stay in your lane. Now, there's much more that could be said about this. We need to stop believing that, oh, well, the way to just get our way is to just be bold, aggressive, and mean and uncompromising. Because it's not. The truth is, God cares more about people's souls than he does the state of our country. It's a fact. So thank you very much for watching the video to the end. I hope it benefited you at least a little bit. And again, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And I'll see you next time. God bless.